What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro vs. Pro. We were off last week, and maybe it's a good thing we had 1 week of rest because we are now going every single week through the FedEx Cup playoffs, barring any unforeseen circumstances, but should be an absolute blast the rest of the season. And Justin, normally we come into the show with like maybe 3 or 4 topics we really want to hit on. We've got, I think, 8 or 9 today, so this is going to be kind of a rapid fire, coming at you hard and fast kind of show today.
Yeah, I think we have a huge, unique situation with what we saw last week with a couple of, I don't want to call them no names, but no names to the general public showing up on the leaderboard. And then the lack of the public perception of quality at what I think is a great golf course quality players at a great golf course. That's going to kind of lead into our conversation about elevated events and stuff that I feel like we got to see that, the depth of golf is really, really there. Mm-hmm. But I think it also shows the difference between the top 20 players in the world and everybody else as well. So you're right. It's a disappointing week to have off with some personal stuff going on, but it also is going to be a great way to talk about it this week and kind of see where we're at.
Yeah, and you brought up the question, like, are elevated events good for golf as a whole? And I think there are a couple ways that we can kind of approach this answer. Like, on the one hand, we're getting this huge difference between elevated events and non-elevated events now, where the strength of schedule goes from being like as strong as majors to as weak as alternate events almost. And it used to be we got a whole lot more in between, where you had maybe like 5 studs at this tournament, 5 at another tournament. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about just how good for the game are they, if they are at all.
I mean, I'm kind of disappointed in it because it's the PGA Tour's response to live is mm-hmm. really what it is. I mean, that's how they came about. I always loved the fact that there were so many people that played events that either fit their schedule, their lifestyle, their family. Now they're forced into these elevated events because of the amount of money they're paying. Mm-hmm. And I always like that the majors were like, hey, everybody's going to be there, right? So now you have everybody's going to be there at these elevated events as well as the majors, not just mm-hmm. everybody's going to be at the majors. So I personally don't love the idea. I think they're too elevated. I don't mind them being slightly more.
Yep.
But they're too elevated in my opinion. I think, and the other thing, like I said, I think it was the answer to live instead of their thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also think the point you're making about like just how important elevated events are versus others is probably a little bit too high. Like, the guys who are winning the non-elevated events, they're making less than second place in the elevated events. They might even be making less than third in some cases. So I do agree there. Like, there should be more of a balance there, where some of the guys who aren't necessarily contending to win these elevated events are feeling like they have a reason to go play the non-elevated events so that they can go chase a win and not just say, hey, you know what? Like, a 10th place finish in these elevated events is going to be better for me than a second place finish in the non-elevated. So I just need to put all my chips into the elevated events basket and see where I go from there. So I agree with that. I think Pat Mayo also made a really good point on his show, where these elevated events, we're kind of seeing the same golfers play over and over. Like, let's just say it's the same top 50 over and over. The average fan maybe doesn't care a whole lot about that, because if all they're doing is tuning in and watching the broadcast, especially in the weekend, they're still going to be seeing different golfers week in and week out, just because different golfers are going to be in contention in any given week. But from our standpoint, it does feel a little bit stale when it comes to like setting a DraftKings lineup. I feel like week in and week out, I'm saying the exact same guys are the best values. The exact same guys are the best payups. The exact same guys are the ones that are underpriced, but maybe will end up being chalky as a result. And so from a DFS standpoint, like for me, the thrill has always been kind of approaching every single slate as its own riddle and trying to solve like what is the best lineup that I can make. And it does feel like we're not getting different riddles from one tournament to the other. So that's something that I have a complaint about. But I feel like that just lands more in the like optimization department, saying elevated events are good, but the PGA Tour has some things to worry about, and they can optimize how they do it. And I think another one, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this, is I would really like to see a rotation year to year of which tournaments are elevated. Like if next year the Honda Classic is elevated, that would be a huge thing, because then we'd get to see PGA National on that center stage.
For sure. I mean, and I think they deserve that. Let's go back to Pat Mayo. I think Pat Mayo is a originator for what we do, right? This podcast that we listen to. I know he's played a huge part in what you do.
Yep.
I want to tell you how honored I am to be, here speaking with the Golf Writer of the Year. I think that more important than anything of what you do, it speaks of your character. I think that, there's so many pay sites out there to pay for stuff and content. I think it shows that you truly care about helping the people that pay to be part of FTN and part of the community and stuff. So yeah, Golf Writer of the Year is a huge deal. I'm super honored to be part of this with you. And I know, like I said, Pat played a huge part in that. So yeah, congrats. You need to talk about that for a second.
Oh, appreciate that. I think you kind of nailed it there. Like what Pat has done so incredibly well with his show throughout the years is he's found this balance between entertaining people and doing so while giving out picks, and hopefully they're good picks. But like he's the first to tell you he's no professional sports bettor. But he's also kind of undergone this journey with his audience by bringing on really sharp guys like Tambo, like Pizzola, in improving their process the entire time. So from one year to the next, he's a better. And as a result, so are his audience. And I think we have kind of like when you and I have talked about what we want this show to be, we also want to find that balance of, yeah, we're giving out picks, but we want it to be more about the entertainment value where we can provide this really unique insight into the world of golf because of our experience as players, and then also really make it an informative show so that we are improving the process of everyone who's watching, just helping them be better bettors, better DFS players, whatever. So it was really cool, of course, to win that award, but it was definitely made a little bit extra special because I was going up against Pat, who like you said, like he's absolutely influenced me as a whole, but particularly the way in which I've tried to in conjunction with you, really run this show. Yeah,
for sure. And that's a thing that it's hard for us, right? Because we want to give all the audience content, but man, there's been, shows in the past where I just want to tell stories. And I've got so many stories that where's the balance of stories? And I'm not going to tell you that we're perfect yet. I mean, for as new as we are, we try to do our best to provide everybody with both sides of it. But I mean, I could sit here and tell stories for hours and hours about different golf stuff.
Yeah.
You're so good at the content side of it. We try to bring, some laughs, a little bit of just, craziness that we've experienced in the golf world that most people don't get to experience.
Right.
I mean, I got asked the question literally yesterday. They were like, oh, you played in Canada in 16. That's when you quit. You played golf for a living for 14 years. How much money do you make? I said, you want to know the truth? Outside of gambling, I lost money. Yeah. Like if I didn't gamble on the golf course, I lost money. Now I did make a good amount of money gambling, playing different games in different places. Mm-hmm. But he's like, what do you mean? I was like, yeah, I was on PGA Tour Canada and I lost money. Mm-hmm. And they just find that astonishing, which it pretty much is. I mean, if you're on I would call it a top 6 tour on the world, and to be able to lose money without even thinking about it is pretty crazy.
Yeah, a few years ago, I played with a guy who the previous year had finished 4th on the Canadian Tour money list. And he was like, I think I profited like $112 on the year when all was
Yeah.
said and done. And that was 4th on the money list. So yeah, the travel costs, the entry fees, man, it adds up quick.
And I wouldn't change it for the whole world. But
Right.
anyway, I think it all leads into like what we have here is a unique situation. Your content has been unbelievable. I think that's why you won. I mean, it didn't happen by accident. And, like I said, I'm honored to be part of this. I think that we have something really cool. But more importantly, I want to make sure that everybody realizes how much you care about the people that read your content and what you do for the other people. If you wanted to keep that knowledge to yourself, it'd probably make me more money because everybody else wouldn't know what you're thinking. So
it's fun, I think, to kind of share that with other people. Like when I have a really cool finding, for example, in some of the research that I do, whether it's PGA, baseball, whatever, like I get actively excited to like write an article and share because I want others to share in that excitement for what's to come. That's part of it for me for sure. Shameless plug real quick. Maybe if everybody likes the video, shares the video with friends, anyone you think that might really enjoy this show, leave some comments with feedback. Do you want more stories? Do you want more, unique insights to like what the players are feeling in certain situations, what kind of pressures they're reacting to? Drop those in the comments, and maybe we can grow the show to the point where maybe one day we're doing 2 episodes a week or 3 episodes a week, and we can get into more stories and kind of compartmentalize all that. But yeah, it's been really, really fun so far doing the show with you, and I can't wait for the rest of the season.
So so let's just lead into from like unique pressures of what Eric Cole felt this week.
Yeah.
Is there a more unique pressure than what he felt? I mean, I know he got in via basically his number because it was a non-elevated event. He's 34 years old, Florida native, caddied for Sam Saunders several events, made his way around. And I think the most impressive part to me was when he got done, he literally said, I didn't have it today. He said, when I stood over the ball, and anybody that's played at a super elevated level will know what that feels like. You can work out every day. You can hit balls every day. You can have everything. And there's days you wake up and you just don't have it. And he's like, I just didn't have it. And you can go back and look at some of the shots and you can tell he's not lying. Now he putted like a genius. So that made up for a lot. But that's a really, really cool story to me. I mean, he comes from a golf background. He's not just like out of nowhere, but he also like he just took the situation in and said, here, I'm going to go give it my best. And here I am. And now he gets to go to a golf course where he won the club championship as a high schooler, right? Or just out of high school, like as a young kid. And now he's got a sponsor exemption into this event. I mean, he would have got in. Well, no, I guess not. He wouldn't. He would have got into Puerto Rico, not here. But he's in this event. Does it translate? Does he take that and run with it to a course he knows, or does he think I made 800,000 last week and I've never had more than 500 to my name,
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. I don't really know. So, like on the one hand, one of the points that I've made on previous shows is like he's a 34-year-old rookie. So I promise you, he has felt the most intensive pressures to get here. Like getting your card is such an incredibly difficult thing. So to have gotten it means that you faced the ultimate pressure in the game and you overcame it. So in that sense, like it's never surprising to me when someone is in contention for the first time and they continue to play well, they step up to the moment. But this is a different kind of pressure. And now he's presented with a different kind of opportunity where suddenly he has at least a little bit of security and can really just chase like just how high he can go. As far as how I think he'll do this week, it's still true that when you look at his like strokes gain profile, he is excellent on and around the greens. Pretty good with his irons too. He is really, really struggling off the tee. So that was a surprise performance to me last week. Like he actually really popped in my course fit expected strokes gained. I put him in my article as an honorable mention saying, hey, Josh and I both like this guy in the data, but we don't necessarily trust it. So I do feel like a complete dumbass for not at least betting his each way, because that would have been quite the payday. But I don't think I'm going to be chasing that missed opportunity this week, because I think the course fit here sets up a little bit worse for him.
The other thing is he was staring down Chris Kirk, not John Rahm or Rory McIlroy, right? And no matter what anybody says, like if you watch guys like that play and you're playing with them, it's a different monster.
On that note, real quick, Data Golf, as we've talked about before, they give these true strokes gained estimates for each event. So basically, they're trying to adjust the strokes gain number for the quality of the field. Both Chris Kirk and Eric Cole last week gained an estimated 3.37 strokes gained per round, true strokes gained per round, I should say. In contrast, Will Zalatoris, with his fourth place finish at the Genesis, was at 3.73. The winner of that event was well over 4 strokes. I think Rahm gained 4.23 that week, so almost a full stroke better between the winners of those two events. Just kind of gives you an indication of just how insanely good the best players in the world are and what it's taking to win these elevated events.
Yeah, and I mean, that being said, like if you can give me Eric Cole at 6,700 or whatever, and he's going to finish 5th, I'm going to roster him every time, right? I mean, like, so it just depends on the way that you want to look at that. But I just think that this is where like we're a little bit different, where you're going to talk about the true data, right? Which is obviously that's the data. The way that you react in the situation to create that data with golf is so far different than any sport that you'll ever play. So if he was playing with Rahm in the last final group on Sunday, or Rory or Scheffler, there's I like there's certain people that are just that have that intent. Tiger, right, in his heyday. I think you're more likely to see that even fall lower, right? I think that his true strokes gained would have gone even lower. That being said, I noticed with Cole, he hit a lot of tee shots that they weren't perfect per se, but they weren't that bad that seemed to end up in bad spots.
I was surprised at how good his action looks. And I actually thought it looked like he was hitting the ball harder than he was. Like it looked to me like, oh, he really got that one, and then it only flew 272 or something like that. So the eye test, I thought he was better off the tee than what the numbers were and what the numbers have been. But that's kind of why I'm pointing to the off the tee numbers is the reason why I can't just say like, yeah, I'm buying in fully, because if he was someone who was really good off the tee and suddenly gets into contention, and his around the green player and his putting, which previously had been holding him back, like really held up under the pressure, I would be more confident saying, okay, you know what? He might have a breakthrough there. He might now have the confidence to actually be a solid player on and around the greens. But he's not suddenly going to become long and accurate off the tee. It's not that type of skill. Like you can't just become really good at driving the ball just because you were in the moment and delivered on some swings.
You don't have to tell me. I've worked years to be good off the tee, and it doesn't work. So I get it.
As we've said before, the ultimate golfer is me off the tee, and then you take over from there. Maybe I hit some of the long iron shots too, and some wedges.
But yeah,
you
no,
take the mid irons around the green play and putting perhaps too.
You might as well just translate that right into let's talk about how good Keith Mitchell is off the tee.
Yeah.
And, if we want to get into this week, that my first initial go-to is at, I think he's like 8,000, Keith Mitchell. And then he's in an interesting spot because I think Jason Day is right there. There's a couple of other guys that are playing good in that spot. But if we're talking about off the tee, which I believe this golf course is big time off the tee, Keith Mitchell has to be in the conversation.
So Mitchell is really funny because he has improved so much all around lately, but there was a time last year where I would look at Keith Mitchell's strokes gain profile and just be like, oh, look, it's me. Because he gains with distance off the tee. He's super accurate off the tee. Like right now I have his baseline estimates as over a third of a stroke gain per round with his distance, almost half a stroke gain per round with his accuracy off the tee. And then he was losing like a quarter of a stroke per round with his irons. He was losing around the greens, and he was a pretty good putter. And I would look at that and say, hey, that's me just at the PGA Tour level instead of the mini tour level. He has gotten so much better. Like in his last 20 rounds, he's gaining almost half a stroke per round around the greens. He's gaining now with his irons even. He's gotten better and longer off the tee. Like he's in his last 20 rounds gaining almost half a stroke per round with distance and almost 3/4 of a stroke per round with his driving accuracy. Just incredible off the tee. So you nailed that. And my course fit stuff also points to both distance and accuracy being predictive here. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Keith Mitchell's right now. I think his game is improving all around. He's just adding to his major strength, which is the most predictive strength off the tee, fully buying into Keith Mitchell as a player.
And not just that, but he's overly expressed his love for Bermuda greens. And so I'm all in on Keith this week, but there's half of me that wants to donate my money this week to get all of him at a less percentage at the Players. So, yeah, dude, I think he was probably a top 50 or 60 player in the world, and I think pretty soon we're going to be talking about him being a top 25 to 30 player in the world. And that's not by numbers. I have no idea what he actually is by numbers, but we're talking about realistic value of what he is as far as numbers and the eye test altogether.
He reminds me a lot right now of Cameron Young around this time last year. Like Mitchell has been around for longer, so it's kind of funny to say that, but Cameron Young was dominating so much off the tee that as soon as he started to flash some kind of strong iron play and some kind of short game, and he was making some putts, it was like, oh man, I'm all in. And that's kind of where Keith Mitchell is right now. Like the off the tee play is such a phenomenal foundation. He gives himself such a consistent advantage off the tee that he just has to be pretty good elsewhere to have a chance to win any given golf tournament. And right now he's getting that improvement in all other areas.
Yeah, like I said, like when I scrolled through and did my the little data that I use and the little things that I know about course history and form, and then, the numbers that I use, he was the first one that stuck out to me.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm excited to see how he does. I think that he is, like you said, the only reason he didn't play last week is because Genesis was an elevated event, so he went there for more money, which he was like, oh, I never thought I could compete here, but he drives it so good, you see what happens. So I think that his time's coming, and I'll be interested to see what I can get. I'm going to Vegas in a couple weeks, and he's going to be on the list that I might shop for some little Masters odds. So,
well, I can tell you right now. Oh my goodness, really? He's 250 to 1 to win the Masters.
Yeah, that's a joke.
And that's on Bet Rivers, where you can get an each way. Okay, yeah, I might have to bet that one once we get off the show today. Because yeah, he's in this elevated event, he's 50 to 1. And Augusta is another course, if I recall correctly, where off the tee play really pops. So 250 to 1 is way too high. I will be going to bet that one right after the show if it is still there. As long as our prop shop isn't just pulling like a stale line on him, because maybe it's just for some reason not recognizing the new Bet Rivers stuff. Bet Rivers is a little bit funky on the prop shop just because it doesn't always name events correctly, so it doesn't always pull guys. And maybe this is a stale one, but if that number's still there, I'll be betting it.
Well, that's a good way to go into how do you feel about your Siwoo 150 to 1? Do you still feel the same way you did? Do you think, and you know that I have an opinion on this. So I'll let you go first, take my opinion out, and then I'll reveal my opinion on it.
Yeah, I definitely still like this. I mean, the best available now is 125 to 1, and then it goes all the way down to 100. So I still really like that number on Siwoo. I think that Augusta is one of the best fits for Siwoo. Like the last few events, he hasn't necessarily been a course fit specialist like he was the first few events that we were all over him. I wouldn't consider him a course fit specialist this week, but I do still think he might be a little bit underpriced on DraftKings and maybe even a touch underpriced in the market this week. But I know what your take is, and maybe I'll just give you the floor on that for why maybe he underwhelmed a little bit last week. But yeah, I still am very much buying in on Siwoo being a potential breakout player, but maybe I'm a little bit less confident that breakout is actually coming like right now.
All right. So I will say that him missing the cut 2 weeks ago matters zero to me. And because he played in the group right in front of Tiger. And so every single shot that he hit for 2 days, he had scuffling behind him. I don't care what anybody says. You have thousands and thousands of people trying to watch Tiger. And no matter how many marshals are holding up their standstill sign, he is hitting with people moving every single shot.
Which shots do you think that would have the biggest impact on? Like what area of the game?
I think it's just everything because you're always waiting. Mentally, you're always waiting for somebody else to move, somebody else to talk, somebody else that's watching Tiger. Oh, look at that shot. I mean, it could be like as simple as a par 4 where Siwoo is at the 140 marker and Tiger's on the tee, and some drunk guy is like, oh, look, he just pulled a tee out of his pocket. Like Tiger's or Siwoo's trying to hit the shot. I mean, that, those people drinking and hanging out and what, I don't blame them for wanting to watch Tiger, and they probably were 3 holes up when they got to that spot. They don't care what Siwoo's doing. They don't care if they're talking while he's hitting. They don't care about any of that. A matter of fact, I'm pretty sure as soon as the tee times came out, I sent you a text that said,
you did.
Does this bother you at all? And you said it didn't, whereas I was on the other side of like, man, this scares me being in that situation. And if it was Jon Rahm, I don't think it would bother me as much. But like, I think it's a disrespect level of like, they're not worried about me. They're worried about Tiger behind me. And they kind of get caught up in that deal. So I would literally throw out Siwoo from the Genesis. I think it was an unfair take. And he still played fine the second day. He didn't make the cut, but he played better. But yeah, I think that is one of the most underrated things that we talk about is tee times and pairings. I don't think that, and each player is different, so I can't get in their mind of what they do. But, if you're playing, people are always like, I don't want to be paired with Tiger. Well, I would much rather be paired with Tiger than right in front or right behind because people are still watching. They're not moving to get in position to watch.
That might be a really good point. And I will admit, like, I have never paid much attention to that, in part because of what you said, like it's going to differ from one person to the next. So I feel like if I can't figure out how it's going to affect a guy, why do I even want to spend the time thinking about it? But maybe you're absolutely right in the sense that like it at least adds a level of uncertainty. So someone who you were otherwise super confident about, maybe you should dial down that confidence. And sure enough, like the way in which Siwoo failed, I think maybe lends a little bit even more credibility to your thought process there, because he really didn't handle it well the first day and then was fine the second day, maybe once he was a little bit more used to it, just like someone like Jon Rahm would be. As you said, it wouldn't matter as much to you with Rahm, in part because Rahm has had that kind of attention on him a lot as somebody who has, won majors and won a lot of tournaments and that sort of thing. So you certainly might be onto something there. The last thing I'll say about Siwoo is if there was a really encouraging sign to take from that missed cut, because the approach play was bad, the around the green play was bad, the putting was bad, but at least he was awesome off the tee. In fact, that was his best performance off the tee in over a year. So he was longer off the tee, he was more aggressive off the tee, and he was more accurate off the tee than he's been in a while. If he can continue to swing like that, and we know the streakiness of the irons, that off the tee play from last week paired with a really good week with the irons, and all of a sudden he's back in contention and we're all the way in once again.
So, and I'll go back to the other side of devil's advocate here. Part of the reason his numbers are so good off the tee is day 2, he had nothing to lose and he was driving it perfect. So he played super aggressive and the numbers worked out that way. So, that's another thing. Like, he knew he had to make a lot of birdies to make the cut. He knew he had to shoot a low number. He got more aggressive and pulled off the shots. If he had shot a couple under the first day, he probably wouldn't been as aggressive. His numbers wouldn't quite pop as much. He would have been a little bit more conservative with certain shots. That's just a factor that we have to think about.
I don't remember with 100% certainty, but I actually think that I almost played him in round 2 showdown because of the way he drove the ball in round 1. And actually, yeah, he gained 0.9 strokes off the tee in round 1 and then 1.1 in round 2. So he was just awesome off the tee.
Yeah.
And that's now actually 5 consecutive rounds where he has gained at least half a stroke off the tee. So that's a really, really good sign for Siwoo. Screw it, I'm back in. Let's do it.
All right, I'm staying in. So now we got a 250 to 1 and a 150 to 1. So nobody can claim us to ever bet the favorites.
Yeah, and I also have Gary Woodland still. You know what? Actually, he's another one. I didn't even include it in guys we want to talk about this week. But he's someone else. I have a 160 to 1 future on for the Masters. That's still available at FanDuel for anyone who still wants to pull the trigger. I'm surprised it's still there after how good he looked at Riviera. That ball striking was phenomenal. So I'm curious to hear what you thought of Woodland there, and just what do you think about him in general right now?
So I'll go a step further. Not only, I think that this is one of the few times that I think that your analytics and your numbers of Woodland are underrated for how many good shots he hit. He hit so many shots right at the flag that went too far.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable. I can't remember if it's Saturday or Sunday, but the par 5, he hits it from like 265, never leaves the flag stick, lands right behind the hole, goes to the back fringe, and I don't know if he putts it or chips, but he ends up making par.
Yep.
And I was like, man, like if you hit that shot from the fairway from that far, you're thinking I can make a 3. All of a sudden you make a 5.
Yep.
And he still finishes well inside the top 10. I mean, dude, he's passing all the eye tests for what I have. I'm not sure about Augusta, but he'll definitely be in some of my lineups this week.
That final round putting performance, and actually it was just the back 9, was so disheartening to watch and so disappointing as somebody who had a 200 to 1 each way bet on him. So all he needed was a top 6 finish for a 40 to 1 payout. Would have been really nice to have. But yeah, to your point, like he birdied, I think it was 6 and 7 to kind of get back into it, including hitting it to a few inches, almost had an ace on the front 9 there. Then on 8 and 9, which were both playing pretty difficult, he hit phenomenal drives and phenomenal wedge shots where he was just hitting them to like the part of the green that he had to aim at, given how firm the greens were. And it was almost like he's hitting the ball so well that he shouldn't be hitting it to where he should hit it, but he should just be aiming at the flags because he's that unconscious right now. And unfortunately, the putts really got away from him on the back 9, so he slipped to a tied for 9th finish. But still, one of the best performances we've seen from him in quite some time. And it is now 8 consecutive events where he has gained at least 0.46 strokes off the tee. When he was the best version of Gary Woodland, it was exactly this. He was dominant off the tee, and then the irons spiked here and there. He's also now put together a few really, really good iron performances in a row. We just need to see the putting turn around. And I'd also like to see the around the green play turn around. And so I still consider him to be a high risk play, like in DFS. And one of the ways to back that up is I have an outright on Sam Burns this week, 50-1. And
imagine that.
When I talked about, yeah, imagine that. I bet him a lot. When I talk about Sam Burns, like one of the reasons why I really like him as an outright bettor is because he's a high volatility player. Standard deviation of 3.05 strokes per round. Well, guess what? Gary Woodland blows that out of the water at 3.43. Nobody else, by the way, over $7,200 on DraftKings is over a 3-stroke per round standard deviation. So Woodland is just as volatile as it gets. Obviously, we don't need the numbers to tell us that because he goes like 4 under one round, then 5 over the next, then 6 under the next. But it's certainly bearing out in the data right now. And it makes him a high-risk play, but it also means he's got a really good chance to find himself in contention.
Well, I just think that as the golfer side of me, I think he's – and I think the reason you've seen him get better the last couple weeks is I think he's committed to the process and committed to what he's doing now. I don't know what he changed. I don't know if it was injury. I don't know if it was from back problems. But I think that he has committed himself to whatever he's doing. And, as a golfer, like if you're in a process, sometimes that doesn't work out very well. But I think the full commitment to it is going to slowly get better. And that's how I view it from the golf side of it, is that you're right. He is capable to go shoot a high number, but if he's overly committed to a shot and hits it too far and makes a bogey, like at least he was committed and hit a good shot. Yes, it may have went too far, but man, when you brought Woodland up a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever, I was not very intrigued. From what I've seen, I think that especially the places when we get with really firm greens. I'm not going to be all in on Augusta because of the around the green play. But if we get to a U.S. Open where the greens are going to be concrete or something like that, or even a British Open where it's super windy because he hits such a controlled flight, I'm really gonna have to talk myself out of playing him because I think the way that he's playing is going to continue to get better and more committed and understanding his process.
I'm bummed from the win point of view that he's only 90-1 this week. After 200-1 the last event, I was hoping for a higher number, but I really like his chances to contend again this week. We can kind of use this to actually transition into the course fit for Bay Hill. Kind of amazing. We're 40 minutes in, haven't gotten to that yet, but obviously we had a ton to talk about this episode. This is a unique course fit model in the sense that it's the biggest year-to-year change that I've at least noticed in the course fit model. So once again, we see a major emphasis on driving distance, but different from last year, we're now also seeing a major emphasis on driving accuracy as well. And the other big change is that strokes gained around the green is showing as more predictive this year than it was prior to last season's, at the expense a little bit of approach play. And so a couple things were different about the way the course was set up last year. Number one is what we know to be a more permanent change, which is a lot of the runoff areas that were like tight lie chips are now just rough. And there's kind of like a competing idea. So I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. Like Rory McIlroy said, hey, the fact that it's been made rough takes a little skill out of chipping, maybe makes around the green play a little bit less predictive. On the other hand, you had some guys say that it actually made the shots around the green more difficult and therefore added emphasis on short games. Personally, I think the bigger change was that the course was just playing more difficult. The rough was higher. The greens were super firm. We had a pretty steady breeze. We're going to get a lot of wind again this year. So I think it just became harder to hit the greens, and therefore maybe it was a little bit easier when you missed, or maybe there was a little bit of skill taken out when you missed, but you were missing so much more often that there was still this enhanced predictive value to around the green. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the changes and how you expect the course to play this year.
So I hate the removal of tight lies.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, it basically takes me from having no chance of playing Hovland to all of a sudden I'll play him, because the rough now you're hitting bunker shots. There's no, there is skill. I don't want to say there's not skill, but it's a release pattern skill. You just kind of loft it up in the air and hit it like a bunker shot, and kind of is what it is. Where those tight lies, man, you could hit it 1 foot in front of you without even blinking from the best players in the world. And so I'm disappointed in that change. I hope they get the greens firm. I don't know if they will. But also, you go from having a bunker shot 5 feet off the green to having a tight lie chip, 20 feet off the green.
Yep.
So I personally don't like it. I hate it for the fact of I love Fitzpatrick off the tight lies. And so I was huge Fitzpatrick for being under-owned. And now, he's going to all of a sudden, he'll probably be higher owned and for all the wrong reasons. And now we get, everybody hitting it out of the rough around the greens. I'm not sure what their goal was by doing it, I think is the biggest deal. Like, what were they unhappy about their product last year to change the course as much as they have?
Well, this change was before last year. So that's why I'm now seeing a different signal in the course fit model. So basically it's saying like what really was significant last year was significant enough that it moved some of these percentages quite a bit. Like I remember last year driving accuracy, I think was down at like 13%. Now it's at 20%. Around the green play was slightly under 10%. Now it's slightly over 15%. And that move is just coming from 1 year of this change data. So I do think
they took away some of those runoff areas this year, even too. Like the one I saw, the one around the drain on, man, I can't remember what hole it is, but all the collection area was one, and they made it all rough, whereas last year was all tight lies. I think that it's the people begging for rough, not understanding that rough in the fairway is a great thing. Yeah. Rough around the green makes it easier.
Yeah, it does, at least when you're below the hole, but it can make it harder to stop the ball when you're above the hole. I think, though, like the biggest point that I want to make is I think this change from runoffs to rough is not that important. I think the bigger importance is just how incredibly firm the greens were and the more difficult rough around the fairways. I think that's why we see the extreme signal suddenly on driving accuracy. And it's another reason why I'm stoked to have this strokes gained driving accuracy metric at FTN, because we're able to separate the two components of off the tee play. And we see a great signal on both. Whereas without that strokes gained driving accuracy, you might only see the signal on driving distance because it's so important here. And you would then lose some of that signal for the accuracy. But that's kind of the way that I want to lean into this. It's basically saying the best ball strikers are really going to have a chance to separate if they can hit greens and create scoring opportunities where other guys are really struggling just to even find themselves with a putt, let alone a scoring opportunity. So that's going to be my approach this week. And I think, the biggest thing I think is we can be confident that the greens are going to be really firm again this week. Arnold Palmer was always a huge advocate for firm and fast, firm and fast, firm and fast. You get a ton of wind in this Orlando area. We're going to see a ton of wind on Friday and Saturday. So even if it starts a little bit soft, the greens will have no issue firming up. So I'm hoping, really hoping for another year where the winner is around like -5.
Yeah. I think that, like, you're talking about the high spin guys and the approach play stuff. Like, the two names that immediately jump out are Morikawa and Hovland, that I would have, if the old runoff areas were like they were, I would have thrown Hovland out immediately, because there's going to be some shots that no matter how good you hit them, like the greens are going to be firm enough downwind that it's going to be really hard to keep it on the green. And now you get in the rough instead of the tight lies, you got a chance. Yeah, I love a good hard test, and I don't think we have enough of them on tour. I don't think you have to trick this place up to be that way. You're not, it's not. We're not trying to. There's no gimmicks in the golf course. It's just a good hard test. When it comes to tests like this, I tend to go to Justin Thomas a lot. And I don't know why. To me, that seems like where I want to end up all the time for the guys. He just has the attitude to handle it. You don't see him. He gets frustrated. Don't get me wrong. We all get frustrated, but he just doesn't seem to handle it the same negative way that others do.
He has been awesome in some of the most difficult rounds over the last couple of years too. Like you can recall the unfair round at the Players last year when he somehow shot 3 under, then had another phenomenal round in the U.S. Open in conditions like that. Maybe it was the PGA Championship. Can't remember.
No, the U.S. Open in New York, where like everybody, the one where Mickelson like hit the putt while it's still rolling. Justin Thomas was like one of 2 guys to shoot under par or something. But yeah.
The one hang up I have on him here is that off the tee play is just so predictive, and if he has a weakness, it's that driving accuracy. So maybe that's slightly a concern, although he has shown some signs of being better, like not overall in the last 20 rounds, but certainly there have been rounds where it's like, hey, if he could just drive the ball like this all the time, he would be in that Rahm, Scheffler, Rory category. At the Phoenix Open, for example, he gained 1.35 strokes per round off the tee, one of the highest numbers that I've ever seen from him. Then he went right back to being his usual self at the Genesis and had lost off the tee in both of the previous 2 events that he played as well. So it's a little bit hard for me to buy in.
No. And I love to hear that, because I think that a lot of people are very similar to you in thinking that. I'm going to the only reason that I'm behind him in this reason, A, his price for a premier player on DFS is low to me, but B, because of his ability to play on hard golf courses. Mm-hmm. And it's a mindset. It's mind over matter to me. And I think that you're not going to see him give up. He knows how hard it is. He's going to play hard. And if the fairways get firm, it's going to be hard for, as much as driving accuracy matters. If you hit it 1 foot in the rough or 30 feet in the rough, it's still in the rough.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's a good leverage spot for me for this week.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there. And also, if you're using him on DraftKings, you're going to get him at pretty low ownership. Like in my first run of single entry ownership, he was the lowest of anyone at Will Zalatoris at 9,400 or above. So potentially a really nice kind of contrarian stud play there. And how often do you get to play Thomas under 10,000 and as a contrarian guy? So certainly can't argue with that point. I do want to talk a little bit more about my Sam Burns outright. A lot of the stuff that I've said previously, like I just think that he should never be 50-1. He's 6th in my expected win rate model, which gets to the fact that he really has the skill of like knowing how to win. So when he's in contention, we can be confident that he's going to win at a higher rate than most would. I also, as I said, I love the volatility from him because his baseline expected strokes gained, it's just not that good for his price range. So that volatility really works a better ceiling. And then the final point being, hey, this is actually a really nice course fit for him. His course fit expected strokes gained is more than double his baseline expected strokes gained for me. One of the, if not the only player in the field that you can say that, but the difference between the two is also really high. So I love Burns this week from an outright perspective. I don't know that I'll get to him on DraftKings. $8,100. It might depend on the kind of movement we see in his ownership, where if he's like easily going to be over 15%, I'll avoid him. If he's going to be under 10%, I'll play him. I think he might be somewhere right in the middle there where it's a difficult decision. But yeah, that's kind of my overall Burns take. And I feel like you're on board with that outright.
100%. If he gets in contention, he's not scared. He's not scared to win. It's a unique quality. Not everybody has it. It's funny because we kind of talked about. I talked to a friend about this today that plays a lot of DraftKings, and we were talking about Keith Mitchell, and Keith Mitchell in the 200 single entry. We had the discussion: is that the sharpest DraftKings contest of them all? And I never really thought about it, but he thinks that it is. I don't really know, but it's got to be close. If you're not max entering like a 150 or whatever. Sam Burns is an intriguing pivot from Keith Mitchell. And my argument was, well, most people don't know who Keith Mitchell is. And his argument was, well, if you're playing the 200 single entry, people know who Keith Mitchell is.
Yeah, they're going to know who Keith Mitchell is.
So
for what it's worth, I have them kind of neck and neck in ownership at the time, but there's plenty of time for that to change. And certainly it's possible that one is going to spike in the $200 because these single entry projections are more for like the $12 single entry range.
Yeah. And I think that, if we had a head-to-head matchup on Sunday tied for the lead, Mitchell and Burns, and let's say they're 4 clear of the field tied, I'm going to bet on Sam Burns because he's a closer. He knows how to win, and he knows, when he gets in that situation.
On the other hand, if they're both entering Sunday tied for 40th, I would bet on Mitchell being the more likely to kind of backdoor his way into a top 20 or a top 10.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree completely. So, I mean, obviously the Burns outright makes a ton of sense.
This kind of gets to this idea, and it's an aspect of data that I think we have a really good chance to have soon here at FTN, where I feel like, so obviously, like I've referenced standard deviation per round quite a bit on this show, but this week and in previous weeks, I sort of think that there are different elements to a player's variance in golf, where on the one hand, you have overall just round to round variance. And that's the metric that most people have access to. But what about event to event? Like, are there guys who they're either going to have it or they're not on any given week, but whether they do or not early, it tends to stay that way throughout the event. And I think Sam Burns would be one of those guys. And so then you also get to like within event round to round where, and that one really has kind of showdown implications. So if a guy is playing well on Thursday and Friday, should you be really confident in backing him on Saturday and Sunday, even if typically he's a high volatility player? And then the opposite would be true as well. Like someone might be really high volatility within events. And so then you say, okay, if he's been kind of poor on the first 2 days, but he managed to get through, now he's one of those really great buy low candidates to kind of give you that like 7 under showdown round at 3% ownership. So potentially some really exciting data in the works here at FTN.
So in one of my favorite contests or the weekend contests, I think that people don't. So like I tend to go back to the same guys that I use throughout the week, but I think that people undervalue how good people play the first 2 days. I think that the general numbers people don't think about how the first 2 days went. They just go by their numbers. And I'm a big time believer that there's certain guys, when they play good, they play good. Like they're going to keep playing good. They're not going to shoot, let's say for instance, 7 unders leading after 2 days this week. And you got some guys at 4 under and 1 over makes a cut. The 4 under guys that you weren't on your radar but makes sense, they're all of a sudden going to jump onto my radar immediately because it might be their week to play good.
And to that point,
a lot of these guys know they have.
To that point, you kind of have to have your level of expertise on these players to know like which ones are the ones who are more likely to continue to play well versus which ones have just had a really nice start, but they're kind of going to show their true colors on the weekend.
Yeah, and it's some of these guys know that they're going to play 30 events and they have to make all their money in 10 of them.
Yeah.
or maybe even 8 of them, 6 of them, whatever that number may be. Super happy for some of those guys that did it last week. But I think that people don't understand that, like, when it's their time to play good, they know they got to take advantage and they go get it done. That being said, I know you love to back people that won the week before. What's your thoughts on Chris Kirk this week?
So the hypothesis behind that is basically just that it's not that like there's some effect that, hey, the guy won before, so I expect him to do really well again. It's that I don't think it necessarily matters all the time what a player has done the week before, but the industry tends to act as though a player can't possibly defend a win with another win. And so normally I think that I'm getting a really nice ownership discount by going to someone who just won the previous week. Chris Kirk, I don't think fits that bill. $7,700. I have him projected for around 12% ownership right now. That's probably a little bit higher than I would want to play him, regardless of whether he won last week or not. So I don't think I'm going to go back to Kirk here, or I shouldn't say go back to him. I wasn't on him last week. I don't think I'm going to go to Kirk this week, but it's certainly not going to be because he won last week. It's just that I don't necessarily love him at this price.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'm pretty sure Josh loved
Josh hit it. Yeah, he did. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. So if you guys aren't listening to the pod, he was on with us a couple weeks ago and has great content on FTN. So I'm pretty sure he was on board with him last week. And it just shows you how the depth of FTN in general, of all the different people that have the data that they use. But yeah, I was just curious because I was impressed by the way he played, because I thought he hit a lot of really, really high quality shots.
Yeah, until his second on 18.
That was so bad.
Oh, God. I will say, like,
it hurts my head.
The one thing that I will give him there is I've heard a lot of people say something along the lines of like, oh, he could have just blown it into the grandstands, something like that, and he could have just made a 5. He was in a position still where I do think the right move was trying to make birdie, not selling out to make birdie, but like he still wanted to hit a quality shot to set up a birdie, because there was a really good chance that Cole was going to make birdie. And I don't think, given how well he was playing and how well he was swinging, I don't think he was really thinking, well, what if I accidentally open the club face and flare this thing so I don't just miss 20 yards right of my line, but I also miss like 10 to 15 yards short of where this ball is trying to go.
It was just a bad shot.
To me, it was a horrible swing, not necessarily a bad decision.
You're right. I agree 100%. And I'm all for, I'd rather somebody hit a bad shot committed to what they're doing than just bailing out and
And honestly, maybe the issue was that he wasn't committed to what he was doing. Maybe the issue was as he was swinging, he was second guessing the shot that he had selected. We will never know, though. Last discussion that I want to have. I don't know if you play any one and done contests throughout the year, but I know a lot of our listeners probably do. Certainly a lot of our subscribers do. The Pat Mayo Open is the one that I play. One strategic thought that I had this week, and obviously we haven't talked a lot about one and done because I think for the most part, one and done is just kind of, hey, you pick your guys and maybe you try to get contrarian, maybe you try to get chalky based on how you're doing to this point in the season, but rarely do we get these like very clear strategic advantages. I think we have one right now, and that is at this point, you can make the argument that only 2 events have really, really mattered, the 2 elevated events. And so if you have not had the fortune of being on Scotty Scheffler at the Waste Management or John Rahm at the Genesis, then guess what? You're behind the 8 ball. And I do think that there's this really nice game theory opportunity where the only way that you can be sure that you have an opportunity to get a win, where the guys who you are trying to track down, the guys who are at the top of the leaderboard, won't be able to is if you use someone that has already had the success, that has already created them their advantage. So I think Scheffler this week makes a ton of sense. Personally, I'm going to play Jon Rahm in one and done at the Player, since that's a $25 million purse versus 20 mil. But the math behind this, I think, is best illustrated with this example. Let's say that this week, Rory and Rahm are both going to be 15% owned in the Pat Mayo Open, in the one and done contest. Among the, let's say, like the top 10% of the leaderboard right now, that number for Rory might be double. He might be like 30% in that area, because those guys can't use Scheffler. They can't use Rahm. They've already used them. That's why they're at the top of the leaderboard. And consequently, Rory's going to be boosted. So maybe 15% overall, 30% in the top 10%. The reverse of that is going to be Jon Rahm might be 15% overall, but in that top 10%, he's only 5% used, because only 10% or only those guys actually still have him available. So I do think there's this really nice opportunity where you can get right back in contention if you nail a winner that the guys at the top of the leaderboard don't have access to. So that's maybe the only one and done thought that we will share on this show, but a fun one that came to me this week that I wanted to share with everyone.
And I agree with that a lot. That being said, I would be waiting to lean on those guys for the majors and the other elevated events. I'm in a small one and done here at home. I think it's too early in the year to use that leverage. I agree 100% with what you're saying. I'm not in for that time yet, because I don't feel like I have to make up all that ground right this week. I feel like there's better fits. There's your Jason Days and Keith Mitchells this week that I feel like are just better fits for what we have going.
So the way that I would push back there is what's the benefit, I guess, of waiting? Because like the purses for these elevated events, they're higher than the majors. Like only the Players has a higher purse. So that's where I want Rahm.
Well, yeah, I'm all in for Rahm at the Players. He would be circled here. Ideally, we get a Rory. Like if I'm one and dunning, right, we get a Rory win this week, hoping that there's not too many people up top. I get Rory at the Players because I think that course fit is better for him personally. It hasn't shown, but that's what I believe. Mm-hmm. And then, we can get a guy like Scheffler at Augusta and, a U.S. Open Rahm or something like that. I think
like you say you're going the route of like kind of targeting players for specific events.
Early for sure.
Yeah.
Early, I target players for specific events, and I use a little bit of, obviously, you know how I am. I'm going to use the way they're playing at that time. Mm-hmm. But, I've got certain guys. Another guy I love this week in the one and done that I've kicked around is Keegan Bradley. We haven't talked about him yet. His form is getting better and better. Firm greens, doesn't have to chip off tight lies. Like a lot of things are pointing to Keegan Bradley for me this week. I'm on Keith Mitchell as of right now. That's who I've entered because of the way he's been driving it. But, those are the kind of guys I'm looking to right this second. I understand, like, I think you have the right notion for that, but I would rather save those guys for another spot.
Fair. And honestly, I hope that most people kind of take that approach, because it means they won't be using them this week.
That's right.
I'll get some lower ownership on those guys because
So you got all your Scheffler one and done this week.
Yeah, I haven't made that final decision, but that's certainly where I'm leaning right now. I'm 99% sure that I'll be using Rahm at the Players, though.
Yeah, I don't blame you. 100% agree there. I like Rory a little bit better for course fit, but can't. I'll also be interested to see if Rahm's transition from West Coast to East Coast goes, how that works out, and it's a little bit different test. So,
if I'm saving Rory for anywhere, it's Quail Hollow. and it, like his course history there is phenomenal, but it's the course fit for me because that course has the highest off the tee signal of any on tour. I remember it being like almost 55% of the overall weight last year. And I had a really nice, what was it? Was it the Ryder Cup? No. President's Cup. Was that there last year? What was
one of the team events
that made them move the actual event last year?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Whatever it was, I remember I had a really good week. I think it was the President's Cup. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah.
Is Quail Hollow where they had last year, the year before they had the 8-way playoff?
Man, I'm not sure.
It was the one. Oh, man, I want to say it was there with there was where Kisner ended up winning. I'm pretty sure it was Quail Hollow because that was where I won the 200 single. So I always has a special place in my heart, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand everything that you're saying there, and it's all 100% accurate. So, it's just a different way of thinking, and I hope that that it works out. But playing Rom at the Players makes the ultimate sense to me.
Mm-hmm. I will give you one final question, and then we'll get out of here. The toughest range, I think, this week on DraftKings is kind of this mid 7,000s range. And we've got a lot of our favorites. Gary Woodland is in this range, Siwoo Kim, and then some other guys who just consistently rate really, really well for me. Corey Connors, Keegan Bradley. You can even throw Adam Scott and Tommy Fleetwood into that discussion. You can go down Tom Hoagie, Brian Harmon, Aaron Wise, Luke List, Alex Noren. So why don't we do our top 3 from this range, and then we'll call it a day.
Man, you're right. This is probably the hardest range, and you didn't even mention Power in there.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't, and I meant to, but I didn't.
It's crazy. I don't think that that he's in my top 3 in that range at this given second. Man, I think that if I had to rank them, I would go Keegan Bradley 1, just because of what we talked to. 2 for me is probably a bit of a surprise, but I love me some Tommy Fleetwood this week. I think he's going to have a great week. I'm really intrigued at that price point. He's going to be in my 200 single. I think this is a good spot for him. It's good. He controls his ball well. He can spin it a lot when he needs to. His form is getting better. I love him there. And then the only one that you didn't mention that's a little bit lower in the sevens that I like is Lee. Minwoo Lee, I think, will have a really good week. I think that he will be – I think we might have mentioned this before, but I think he's got top 30 in the world potential. So I think that would be the third place I go here.
Nice. I'm going to kind of break this into 2 categories, kind of chalk and contrarian. I think Connors and Keegan are the 2 best plays in this range, just from a just pure what's their expectation standpoint. But I think from a differentiation standpoint, Siwoo Kim, our boy, really stands out. And I would also put Taylor Montgomery in that category as someone who's going to be low owned and has a chance to really kind of break through and kind of show everyone why the hype was there so much in the fall and why it was there early on in these elevated events. And he's kind of fallen off, but I think he has a nice chance to bounce back here. Just obviously one of the best putters in the world already. Quite good off the tee. We haven't seen the iron play, but it's not something that would shock me if it just shows up, because there have been guys in the past. Keith Mitchell is obviously one of them who they break onto the scene. They show that they're awesome off the tee. Cameron Young was the same way last year, and the iron play is the only thing that needs to turn around. And guess what? It does, because in small samples, iron play is just not that stable. And when you first break out onto the tour, maybe that's the hardest thing to really kind of figure out and just get your bearings with. So I like the chances of Montgomery there, and I like the chance of Siwoo Kim continuing to make us look pretty smart with some good golf out there. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.